Hello, everyone, to episode 0 of my campaign journals for the upcoming campaign I'm starting. The reason this is episode 0 and not 1 is because I will be covering a one-shot we did that was the prequel to the coming campaign. I did this around Halloween 2025. I believe we did actually play on Halloween Day, which was nice. Only 2 of the players were able to make it, though, and one of them is likely not going to be in the coming campaign because of scheduling conflicts. It's possible that he might be able to play for like the first bit over a third, bit less than a half of each game, but I imagine that would be a bit taxing for him, so I don't expect him to actually do it. But anyways, what I had decided to do for the Halloween one shot is I was interested in running a game where they had to catch Jack the Ripper. So it may have been a mistake while setting it up, because running mysteries in D&D are hard. Murder mysteries are on the easier end of mysteries because Dungeons & Dragons is all about combat, so some players might actually have abilities or spells that can help them determine, cause of death or what weapon was used and stuff like that. Thing is, I had only ran a mystery once before and it went well, but that was very much like a game of Clue, and it was leading up to a full quest after that. This time, not the case. I was like, oh, they'll find Jack the Ripper in this city that has a population of around 10 million people. It'll be fine. So I made this adventure description, which you can, pause the video here and read it if you want. But the gist of it is Jack the Ripper's on the loose, been killing people basically since the war ended last spring. Is now early fall. The city guard and the police are too stretched thin to really catch the guy because, there's a lot going on. Thieves guilds are rising in power. The new noble houses that replaced the old ones aren't really up to par yet. They're still kind of figuring things out. They don't have, their own stuff going on. And there's a bounty of 50,000 gold pieces and, higher level mercenaries. They were 5th level. The players were 5th level. They were given temporary detective badges to have police authority. And I posted this adventure description in the Discord server. They saw it, read it, started working on their characters. And then I sat down ready to start prepping the one shot. And I was like, I don't know that much about running a mystery. I'm going to go look up how to run a murder mystery in D&D. Turns out you're supposed to limit it to one building and only have 8 or so, 8, a dozen, something like that suspects. A small, very something you can count on, 1 to 4 hands. Something easy to keep track of, where each suspect can have their own name and motives and all that stuff. As you can see here, I did not do that. There are about 10 million suspects, maybe minus half, because they can be fairly confident that Jack the Ripper is male. So 5 million suspects, yeah, sure, totally narrows it down. It doesn't. But eventually I figured out how to manage it. Just maybe don't do this the way I did it. So here we have my GM info, basically all the answers to questions they might solve. The weapon used was a +2 unholy adamantine dagger. The culprit, oh, that's not right. They're not a level 10 sorcerer. Because only 2 of the players were able to make it, I had to drop it down to just a regular vampire, which is level 6 or 7. because he had other monsters with him, other undead that he controlled. He continuously was casting doesn't need to be communal non-detection. That note also didn't get changed before the session. Regular lesser non-detection, or regular non-detection depending on what level spell that is, works on himself and all his equipment. He doesn't need to separate targets. And he uses diamond dust as a material component for non-detection, apparently. So he had some diamond dust on him when they killed him as extra loot. I decided to make him a vampire after coming up with a couple potential categories of people that might have motives to do it. Basically, because Jack the Ripper targets prostitutes, says like, oh well, you know, the vampire, like there's a few vampires in the red light district, so if they want to increase their profits, they can be cutting the competition a bit, you know. And then of course also he needs to drink blood, so you know. Of course vampires are creatures of night, so that's why I put for opportunity, that and teleportation spells. And of course vampires have very high strength scores compared to normal people, and they're sorcerers, so definitely has the means to do it. And I only ended up setting up one crime scene because multiple crime scenes wouldn't really have helped much. And of course, to fit the theme of murder mystery, of course it was raining fairly heavily. You know, not a lot of wind, just a lot of water droplets that were quite big each. No lightning or anything, but you know, gray skies even during the day. And they headed there, you know, mid-morning, because somebody needed to report the body at like dawn, so like 6:30, 7 a.m. And then, you know, the police and town guard had to show up, and then the players had to get there. So it was probably around 9 or 10 a.m. by the time they got there. And it had been raining for a few hours. So the footprints were partially washed away by the rain, but, you know, the parts that were on like the tops of flagstones that were a bit higher than the other flagstones would still be there because less water had washed over them. They would have had, you know, time to dry a bit before the rain started. So they were able to figure out that Jack the Ripper's feet, well, his shoes were 11 inches in length. Not shoe size, because no one knows what shoe size actually means. I mean, there's probably an answer if you went to Wikipedia and looked it up. But there's no, they're still using cobblers in my world. They're not mass producing shoes out of plastic yet, so it's measuring inches. So they beat the DC 20% check. Obviously they got the foot size, and I'm actually gonna go ahead and zoom the page in a bit here. It's always easier to read. I'll scroll up if you had trouble reading it before. More details. The face was of course slashed up because it's D&D and magic is a thing. The slashes weren't just random damage cuts. They were ritual symbols. But they were ritual symbols for like different schools of magic that were all mixed together. And if they hit DC 30, which I don't remember if they did or not, but they would have noticed, like, yeah, they've got like the symbols for like big complex rituals, but none of the basics they're needed for like all rituals of that thing. Like, it's like they're trying, specifically making sure they don't accidentally perform a ritual while misleading people who are looking at it who don't know better and won't be able to determine, like, yeah, there's just a bunch of nonsense code slapped together. No wonder it's not, you know, running as a code. And of course a heal check to see that she was in fact dead before the carvings even started. Of course, something about Jack the Ripper that I learned when reading the Wikipedia page while prepping for this session is that apparently on a lot of the victims, he cut their neck down to the bone all around it. So yeah, there was neck damage. I was like, oh well, that's convenient. Vampire, you could like hide the fang marks of the vampire blood sucking that way. And because it's fairly well hidden, it was DC 30. They did not get that one. They were not able to hit that DC. I don't think either of them were particularly good at heal. There were some missing organs: the heart, the liver, the lungs, and the stomach. Those of you who know what that means know what that means. That was a fairly low heal DC. They got that. It's basically, do you know what organs are in a human body normally? Check. And where they are. And then they did hit, I think they hit the Knowledge Arcana or Spellcraft DC for this. If you're confused about the skill names, I play Pathfinder First Edition, so there's like way more skills in it. But basically it was like necromancy spells can utilize hearts, but this one hit die civilian, the heart isn't going to do anything. Unless you have like 100 of them. Spells that cure or suppress disease or poison can utilize livers, but again, it's not powerful liver. And secondly, those spells, like the DCs for common disease and poisons, are so low that those spells, like, you don't really need boosters to them. They're gonna work if it's not like advanced mummy rot or some other super high DC disease. Lungs could be used for increasing the generation of transmutation spells that affect breathing, and stomachs just aren't useful as extra spell components, at least not in humans. Maybe something that breathes fire or eats magma might have a stomach that can be used for something fancy with spells. They were not trained in profession cook. They didn't even think to check that, so that's gonna be a fun story for later. But those are the ingredients for haggis, the meat ingredients for haggis, if they were from a sheep. And he's taking them to make haggis out of it, which is something that I thought was kind of funny in a dark humor way. So I was like, oh well, I'm gonna put it in there. It's a one shot. I can do some kind of ridiculous stuff in it and not have to worry about the consequences. Detect magic would have the residue of transmutation evocation, which was the transmutation, I believe, is the numeric bonuses for a enchanted weapon, and evocation handled the unholy part of the enchantment. I don't think they might have hit detect magic, but one of them was a gunslinger and the other was an alchemist. I don't think alchemists really have cantrips like that, though I suppose I could check real quick. Yeah, alchemists do not have cantrips, so they did not have detect magic at all. They also did not have detect evil, but if they did, they would guessed that either the blade used was evil or an evil spell was cast in the area recently. The unholy enchantment is close enough to evil. That's why I put that there. They did not have a way to determine the material of the weapon, but if they did, it was adamantine. And then the main thing, because eventually what I figured out I have to do to get this murder mystery to work, despite the not fitting to the norm of the path, was just fill as much stuff out as I could ahead of time, so that way I had something to improv with after. So after they followed the bloody footprints and came back, which was like one of the last things they did there, they got a perception check because something had changed. There was a raven there, and it was sitting on a nearby roof ledge just in the rain, which isn't normal for birds. So they all make a sense motive. It was fairly low DC. It was watching the area fairly intently. This was basically my equivalent of having the killer return to the scene of the crime while it's being investigated. That hubris that is typically the failure. And they were able to, I don't remember if it was the knowledge nature of the handle animal, but they did, because this was months ago. This is 3.5 months ago by this point. They were able to hit It's Not Normal. I think they were able to hit the DC 25 for it being an awakened creature. It was an awakened raven, so it had, human intelligence or close enough, and it did know common, and they did get it. They basically bluffed it, acting as if they were going into the building under it, so that way it wouldn't fly away or try to dodge, so that would be flat-footed when they acted. And one guy was playing a Wyverian, so he had wings. They weren't very good. He kind of like half jumped, half climbed, half flew to lunge at the thing and grapple it, which, it's a bird. It's super easy to grapple because size penalties to combat maneuver defense, and just having a really low strength score because it was, a raven. So he grabbed it with like an extra 15 to his roll. Like, he was way over the necessary amount. And they were not able to understand it because, well, it didn't speak common. It is not like a parrot. It cannot form words very well. So there was a linguistics check involved to be able to understand what's saying, and they failed. And at that point I was like, well, just go to the lumber district. There's a bunch of druids there. It's mostly druids. They grow lumber and other stuff like that for the to sell to the city as preventive maintenance to prevent them from deforesting the area. They're druids that protect the forest by making it so that way the people have no need or want to cut it down because they can just get the magic wood that grows really fast, and is probably better for building structures out of because, magic. And there they were able to make progress. But real quickly, I want to show my failsafe. If things die down, one of the officers will get a call on a sending stone. A letter that claims to be from the killer comes in to the police station. It claims that killer will be making an appearance at and claiming his next victim at the Gold Coin Casino, which, stereotypical name for a casino in D&D. I'm not good at naming things. It takes me a while, and there are dozens of casinos. One of them is going to be called the Gold Coin. So that would basically be if it doesn't work out up to that point, just put them in the proper situation of enclosed space, like a dozen at most possible suspects, and carry on from there as if I'd done it right in the first place. Of course, I would give them the chance to gamble, because of course I want them to gamble and lose all their money. It would be hilarious. It's only hilarious if it's their own fault. Like, if they got a spell hit on them that turned all their gold to lead, that's just being a jerk. But if you taunt them and be like, oh, you want, of course you'll win, you're lucky, come on, play, and they lose all their money, it's their own fault, and it's hilarious. Especially since it's not real money, it's just gold pieces in game. So then the owner would give a speech, thanking the regular guests, the new ones, hoping they continue to return, because it's like the anniversary of when the place opened, like 5-10 years, something like that, maybe 20, who knows. It didn't come up because they were making progress the other ways. And then he would go into his office, roll a marble that had a scroll Deeper Darkness cast on it under the door, and grab the lady that was stealthily raiding the charcuterie table and sitting at the bar and not actually gambling and just, taking advantage of the free drinks and all that. And then, the players would probably, do the hero thing and go catch their criminal and maybe save the girl. But what actually happened is I was able to pull off the crime scene thing. They took the raven to the druids. They didn't need to enter the district because the guy at the gate, because it's a private district of the druids and some rangers and maybe a plant sorcerer, maybe. It's one of the few districts that are not just open to the public. Anyone who wants to walk from district to district is able to. They didn't need to enter, which they would have been able to. They have the temporary detective badges. They have temporary authority. But they didn't need to, because the guy on duty at the gate that day was like a level 3 or 4 druid or whatever, and he could do speak with animals. There's no material component, so he was very happy, since they had the temporary detective badges, to just not charge for the spellcasting fee. So it was real easy. And he basically just translated what the bird said. They asked some questions. The bird wasn't particularly secretive, because slightly below average human intelligence, and not really informed on or have the context of why it's such a big deal that these people are killing each other. Like, it's a bird. You used to live out in the forest. Animals kill each other all the time. So basically it's told them who its master was, who the killer was, but it's a pet. Like, it's basically an awakened familiar, but it's for a sorcerer, so they don't really have familiars. But so it doesn't like give a name. It doesn't know its master by its name. It has a title, and he is like, what would the title be? Oh, I know, the Master of Bets, because he owns the casino at this casino. And because one of the players, the file name for his character is literally Gambler. Basically said that was his casino that he went to a lot, and that he was a grade A loser there. I don't remember what the term was from one of the Futurama special episodes. Actually, it might not have been a special. It might have just been one of the regular episodes. But Zoidberg got a bunch of cash that the Robot Mafia threw in the dumpster. And there was an alarm at the casino on Mars. It was like category 8 loser or chump or something incoming, and it like flipped the carpet over to red carpet, and a bunch of servants and stuff coming to meet him. Basically that he lost a lot of money there on a regular basis. Every paycheck he got, he went to the casino after, and gambled most of it away. And that player also, because I forgot to give Jack the Ripper an actual name other than Jack the Ripper or casino owner, and he gave the name Jericho. And there was a little bit of role play involved, which you don't normally see too much in a combat oriented one shot. So here's a bit of an editor's note that I noticed. I forgot a couple of things that were quite important to the story here. So the gambler, this guy, he, in his backstory, because I forgot to mention in the adventure description that Jack the Ripper was mostly killing prostitutes, only killing prostitutes, I decided, or he had put in his backstory that his wife had died, one of the earlier or more recent victims, actually, I believe, because he was a soldier in the war last spring, and then pretty soon after that, his wife was killed by Jack the Ripper, which is why he's so sad and a gambler and alcoholic and all that. So I'm gonna point that out now, and then I have to put another editor's note near the end that's fairly important as well. End of editor's note. So let's see. Yeah, so we only had access to a regular vampire because, again, only 2 players were actually able to play it. Looks like they were level 8 standard vampires. And of course, I do maximize hit points in my games just because I want players to do something with their downtime other than retrain hit points. I want them to do something interesting with it. But yeah, so he was mostly casting Burning Hands the entire combat. It's just good. It does more damage than Magic Missile. The players didn't have such high reflex saves that he should have been using Magic Missile instead. But this, that, and the other thing. But yeah, originally I was gonna make him a level 10 vampire, which would give him 5th level spells. And I was gonna Baleful Polymorph a guy who had, when he was running a game, Baleful Polymorph to my healer, when we were fighting a lich, and I wanted a bit of revenge, but he wasn't available to play that day. He had a Halloween party to go to. But he should be playing the upcoming campaign, and I did, despite it not being a cleric spell, I did give the cult leader that they'll be fighting in the first dungeon Baleful Polymorph anyways, since they have 5th level spells. There was also a hulking zombie, which I spell zombies with Zambi, and just because it's fun. I like the pronunciation, and also because my Zambies are never staggered, which a lot of them are in base Pathfinder. A ghost of some kind and some skeleton minions. The ghost ended up being a Poe from Legends of Ocarina of Time. I used the token that I have for it, which we'll see on the map soon. But it just did a touch attack with Lantern for 2d4 fire. It, no level drain, no ability drain. I didn't want the fight to get that complex and have players actually have to keep track of that on Mythweaver's character sheets, which they're, Mythweaver's sheets are good. They're basically paper, like as if you're playing with paper and pencil, except these boxes are infinitely big. Like these lines, you can put in, thousands and thousands of letters and words in them. So that's the advantage over paper. And there's some automation, like all the stuff that fills in on the AC, it totals automatically. It figures that touch and flat-footed and all that automatically, and does a lot of this stuff automatically. But that's kind of it. Like if you have an item that gives you just a +1 untyped stacking bonus, 3 reflex saves, you gotta put it in the miscellaneous modifier. Like you have to keep track of that stuff manually, and every once in a while you're like, man, where did I get all these bonuses from? And you have to like Control F and go through and count them and hope they're spelled right, so that way Control F actually picks it up. So that's one of the reasons I'll be switching to Foundry, which has character sheets in it that have a lot more automation. Like you can just put in the item a function that makes it add +1 reflex, and choose the type bonus and all that, so you can just grab the item and forget about it. Yeah, the skeletons minions are a 4th edition thing. I started with 4th edition personally. I also watched Matthew Colville on YouTube. He has talked about using minions in other editions. Basically, the idea is they have 1 hit point, but they never take damage on a successful save. So like if they make a reflex save for half and they pass, it's nothing. In Pathfinder terminology, that would mean they have evasion and stalwart. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I even wrote evasion and stalwart on here. They just had 2 claw attacks, with +0 to hit, so it's just a flat d20, which if I go and check the AC of the players, 26 and 21. So yeah, they were nat 20 checking to hit, and only did a d4, or well, if they crit, but they couldn't crit because they'd have to roll a d20 on the confirmation as well, and that's very unlikely. But yeah, a 1-hit die undead does not have any base attack bonus. Strength and dex were both 10, just flat 10s. They didn't have any intelligence. They were mindless. They had no constitution score because they're undead. Their saves were all just +1. I think I picked that arbitrarily. I think it should be +2 on will saves and +0 on the others, but I didn't really care when I was making it. Yeah, the players are never going to know that the numbers don't add up properly. I mean, the stat block is a few lines in a Google Doc. And then the hulking zombie, which was a large undead. This I also pulled basically from 4th edition, and then modified because the map that I was using for the fight was from the 4th edition starter set, which had a hulking zombie in it. So I gave it 4 hit die, an 18 strength, again, mindless. Filled this up properly, gave it 3 natural armor, 2 slam attacks, made him crit on 19, which is normal in Pathfinder, larger crit ranges. you don't have to be a fighter. Some weapons in Pathfinder, like the rapier in Pathfinder, just crits on 18 no matter who wields it. Most swords crit on a 19. I think a lot of bludgeoning weapons do a ×3 critical right off the bat. Depends on the weapon. Some of the lesser weapons are just normal, only crits on nat 20, only does double damage. And then I gave it regeneration, which makes it so that way it doesn't die unless the regeneration is shut off. It's only 1, so only regains 1 hit point a round. But they just had to do something to shut it off. Like, it could have been holy damage, it could have been a good aligned weapon, it could have been positive energy damage because it's an undead, so it takes damage from positive energy, etc. Like, I literally put here, poking it with the holy symbol of a good god would work to shut off the regen. You just have to do something a little bit extra to get it gone. And then on top of it being a regular vampire, I also gave him a +3 cloak of resistance, a +4 headband of charisma, a +2 ring of protection. I made a little D8 charts for the storage room for some loot that was just kind of normal stuff they could find. It could be empty if they rolled a 1. It could be some rope, could be some gold, could be a couple alchemist fires, could be a little bit of diamond dust, some poker chips, because it's a casino, a gemstone, a couple potions of haste. The tables, because Jack the Ripper, being a vampire sorcerer in the map that I chose, apparently he's an alchemist, not as a class, but as a profession. A side thing, just on he has ranks in craft alchemy is the point, and craft potion or whatever, the brew potion, I think it's brew potion, the crafting feat. So on the tables there were 6 potions, 4 potions and 2 alchemist fires. There's invisibility, water breathing, 2 of haste, and 2 fires. And they did pick up a few during combat that as kind of like, okay, roll a d6 to determine which one you pick up. And there was a loot chest with 2,000 gold pieces and poker chips and some transformatives, which those are a fun thing. So one of the players, the one that ran for me and did the baleful polymorph thing, in his world, there's a thing called transformatives that let you take on aspects of whatever the creature it's made out of is. So like you get a breath weapon from a dragon transformative. You always get some bonuses to ability scores. You can get some cool stuff. I'll go through what these 2 players got when they took them a bit, because my chart does work differently. But let's go ahead and go over to the table. It does say Christmas one shot. I was gonna do a Christmas one shot, but we couldn't get multiple players available on the same day, even into January, so we weren't able to actually play it, sadly. And this was back when I was running on Roll20. Again, I'm switching to Foundry, so it'll be a lot better for most things. One thing I've sadly discovered about Foundry is that I am not going to be able to make a maze that changes as you move through it very easily. I think the only way I could really do it is if I basically made half the walls secret doors, and did it that way to open and close them. But here on Roll20 I was able to do it just with multiple sets of lighting walls that were attached together, that I could just swap one set for another while the players were stopped for a moment within the maze. The one time I did that, I had 4 of them as a decent sized maze, and they actually made it through very quickly. It only took them like 10 minutes, so it's not really worth it to set that up, because it took way longer to set up than to play. And if it's taking you longer to prep than it is to play, then you need to change a thing or two, because it should be taking less time to prep than it does to play. Yeah, so here are two characters. As you can see, they took quite the beating. Joseph here is the gambler. I believe he is human. Yeah, so he is human. He is a gun chemist, mine chemist, alchemist. He was using a pepper box because we have early firearms. A pepper box has like either 6 or 8 barrels that are each loaded and fired separately, so we didn't need to reload very often. And he used alchemical cartridges to do increased damage. And the other character, Victor here, he's a Wyverian, which I think is the Pathfinder equivalent of a Dragonborn, but they have like wings and they're a bit more human sized, while Dragonborn are, supposed to be like bigger by a little bit, still medium sized creatures, but bigger. He actually needed my help designing his character because he wanted to get a musket down to free action reload times. That way he could, do a full attack and do 2 attacks in 1 turn and not have to worry about how long it took him to reload. And I basically told him, it was like, there's just an archetype for gunslinger called Musket Master that decreases your reload time a step, right? And then he also just got fancy, basically advanced bullets, like still early firearm technology, but they are basically like packets that you just take it, shove it down in there, and it increases your reload time a step. And it got down to free action at that point, so he was able to do that. Actually, he wouldn't have been able to make multiple attacks on a full attack anyways, because he was only level 5 and you need to be level 6 for that if you have a full base attack bonus class. Anyways, onto the crime scene. So this yellow arrow was not originally there. That was just me drawing out for them the direction of the footsteps, the bloody footprints. Over here we have the body with a city guard and a police officer already here because they were called in first. The players had shown up as the temporarily hired detectives hunting the bounty. And they investigated the scene, got all those skill checks that I talked about the body. They kind of walked around, checked out. Most of these buildings were empty because they're basically tiny houses for the poor, because this is in the poor part of the city. They left hours ago to go to work. Probably after, definitely after the body was seen, because it was one of these guys. Is either the guy who sells fish fillet, who is either the guy who sells fish or the guy who sells cloth. One of them, when they were opening their business, going outside to flip the sign from closed to open, they saw the body and reported it. Over here, this was, I don't think they even looked over here, but this was like a bathhouse and beds that was owned by one of the inns. I don't remember which one up there, but they never looked at that. They're like, oh, nobody's in there, move on. This guy is a bit of a general store, so he has a bit more money. He didn't open until very late into the morning because he can, he's got a bit, he can afford to work a reasonable number of hours. But there's like a glass here to make it so that way people couldn't just reach over the counter and try and mug him. Wall here with the locked door. And like if you bought anything from him, it went through like a slider box, so that way you never had direct access to him. And they ended up buying a bird cage here to store the awakened raven in. So yeah, that came in handy. But he didn't see anything because he didn't wake up until far after it was over. Another house here that didn't have anyone in it. There's innkeep up here, but they didn't see anything either. And then there's a blacksmith here who kind of just like fixes or sells low grade like pots, pans. Had a few weapons for sale, but not many because they take forever to make. Door hinges, stuff like that. Um, he of course didn't see anything either, but he did try to sell them some things. I don't think they bought any. The only person with any really useful information was this lady up here, because the victim was here last night, you know, working as a prostitute, trying to get people to, you know, sell her body to. And Jack the Ripper came in, and you know, it was busy last night. It's a bar in a city where everyone is sad because it sucks, and it's everyone's working, you know, 12 to 16 hour shifts at a factory, and it's like early English Industrial Revolution. You know, everyone's drunk at this point. So the place is packed. She didn't get too much information, but she was able to. Yeah, he was like a really pale. He was a high elf, I think, too pale to really tell. And he was definitely rich. Like that's what they were able to get from that. And then when they came back from the footprints, the bird was like over here or over here on the rooftop. And they went to the lumber district, the druids. There was no map for that because it wasn't going to be combat, or there wasn't going to be much to do other than just talk. But eventually they got to the casino. If I can find their tokens, just kind of drag them up here where they would have started. The door is over here. Okay, so yeah, they went in. Fun thing, this character here, actually no, that was a different. So this character, this token here, was actually a character played by a different player in the past, not either of the ones in the session. But yeah, he was also a gunslinger, I believe. But yeah, this is the low stakes area. You know, where the middle class or less rich upper class do their gambling. You know, this is what the bartender looks like. You know, messy apron should tell you enough about. It's not that great. So they basically just immediately booked it downstairs, which is over here. I'm gonna go and pop up the dynamic lighting walls to show, like, I cut off this stairway, I cut off these two bits, I cut off this like wraparound area that's included with the map, and then I added this bit of map, which is like half of the dungeon from the 4th edition starter set, and then I just cut off the parts that I wasn't using. So there's the storage room, these two rooms, and then the alchemist lab. These two were not here yet, the guards. But they went in. So the security down here, a bit tougher. You know, full plate, bigger swords. But they know Joseph the Gambler by name, because he comes here so often. You got a couple people playing the slots. You got a couple people over here playing pool. I want to say this larger table is billiards. I'm not really sure. There's a lot of stories to tell the tokens in here, though. So the currency exchange guy you might recognize, that's the same guy just in a different pose as is on my channel icon. The pianist over here, I believe it's Professor Rowan from Pokemon, but a bit modified because I used him as the basis for a character I played in a Living World server. You might be able to see, but I doubt it, there's some white powder around his nose. His whole thing was it was a Spheres of Power game, and I was messing around with the dual sphere feats and the dual sphere drawbacks. So there's a whole thing about dual sphere medicine. Is it right for you? And it had like all kinds of allergy triggers and stuff, like, you know, the fast talking bit at the end of an allergy commercial where it lists symptoms, side effects, and always ends with disability or death. So it had a lot of stuff like that. Like loss of forklift certification was one of the things that was one of its possible side effects. And you got some rich people up here. This guy, I'm sure most of you know who Absurd is. A character for like a one-shot or short adventure that it was in 5th edition, and they had multi-classed every class in 5th edition. And I basically did that, except it was a Gestalt server, so we had 2 classes per level. So at level 6, I had 12 different classes, and I kind of had to stop at that point and abandon the character because it was really hard to keep him optimized at that point. Because I couldn't find a way with the classes I had remaining that I hadn't taken yet, with the restrictions I had given myself, which was no spheres of power and might classes, basically, and no archetypes. Because that's too easy in a multi-class and do well. I had hit the limit where I could not keep up with full BAB and all good saves. And between that and trying to find ways to qualify for more prestige classes, so I had more options, I couldn't really, I didn't have the time. I didn't want to use the time to figure it out. It was not that important to me. This high stakes roulette dealer is another character I played who was a healer. Again, spheres of power, living world. She was a wraith, which is a class in spheres of power that has the ability to passively possess people. So possess them without taking control of them, basically hide in their body as an incorporeal ghost. So I couldn't really be targeted, but I could heal people, everyone in the party. So a bit of an overpowered healer, not because I was healing that much, a ridiculous amount, but just because you can't stop me from healing people. This person here, not a character I've played. This is more art included with Roll20 Premium, which I don't have anymore because I'm switching to Foundry. But this person I decided is a silver dragon, which I also decided at that point, with new lore for my world, some dragons can basically stay polymorphed as a human as long as they want. More common in both lawful and good aligned dragons. Silver dragons, I believe, are lawful good. So she's not super uncommon, but she is like a decently powerful creature on her own, and also quite rich. Then over here we got high stakes blackjack with a goblin pimp just cleaning the table. Taking all the money. And then over here we have the potential victim, the lady enjoying free drinks and subtly taking from the charcuterie table all the time without ever actually gambling and spending much money. And over here we had the office where Jack the Ripper was sitting because he's the owner. And basically when the players, let me grab their tokens. When the players came in here, they went to confront him, and it was basically a case of he tells you, hang on a minute, I'm working on something. And he pulls up a big piece of parchment, and then they can't tell because neither of them are spellcasters. One of them is an alchemist, but he's not very good at spellcasting anyways. And alchemists aren't really spellcasters in the same sense. And he does the scroll of greater darkness or deeper darkness. So even though Victor over here has dark vision, he still can't see. And this is when initiative starts. And I think Jack the Ripper won initiative. And he basically moved, used a standard action to open a door, and that's all he could really do on his turn. The players did not fully realize that, it's only going to take, he only has those actions, he can't do anything else, but they couldn't see, so they just walk in right past him, and it's hilarious. And they move however much they can in a double move. I think one of them opened the door here, and I went back to my plan of, well, now he's got to get past him, but I was going to ignore most of the doors anyways by going into gaseous form, because he's a vampire, he can do that. So he goes into gaseous form, pretty much makes his way down here. I swapped the token out for Jericho with the hit points and the AC, which if you didn't catch it on the main page, the 17 on the left here is the touch AC, the 23 is the regular. Flat-footed isn't used nearly as often, so I don't list it. But they make their way in there, and keep in mind, so at this point they closed the store. I think it's open because they went back out after to block the deeper darkness effect, so they could see. So Victor has dark vision, like 60 feet. He can see fine. Joseph is a human. He needs light. So this thing, I believe, produced light. It's like a forge. It's producing quite a bit, but it's blocked by this wall. And then you've got the ghost with the lantern producing light, which is basically the only reason Joseph was able to be productive without spending, an action to light up a torch or something. Spend around wasting time. And there was a hulking zombie, which I do not have the token for on the map anymore. Checked earlier, sadly it's not there. The skeleton minions went down immediately. I think they had an AoE damage ability, one of them. Jericho went in greater invisibility at some point. Yeah, that's the only 4th level spell that vampires have by base is greater invisibility. So he went greater invisibility and just started doing flaming hands on mostly Joseph. Because Victor was kind of hanging back with the musket. I don't know why Joseph kept chasing him for the first half of the battle, considering he also had a gun. But yeah. And then near the end of the battle, Jericho, Jack the Ripper here, he had like 20 hit points left. Both of these guys were down to basically what their hit points are at now. I want to say Victor at some point had thrown a grease bottle on Jericho, which made his invisibility much less useful because the grease was not invisible. So yeah, Jericho is sitting there basically not invisible anymore, but big. And actually, yeah, he appears to have lit the grease on fire with an alchemist fire that he pulled from a table because he got the on fire symbol on him. And then Joseph and Victor are about to die because look how low their hit points are. Jericho's still got like 20. He's like 3 hits away from dying. And I was like, hey guys, aren't firearms supposed to hit against touch AC in the first range increment? And they were like, are they? And we went and looked it up, and yeah, they are. So they had been hitting against the 23 AC, or trying to hit against 23 AC instead of the 17 AC touch AC, which is because every 1 on a D20 is 5%. There's 6 of them. That's a 30% difference in chance to hit. So if we had been doing it right the entire time, they would have killed him super fast and easy. But we corrected from there, and that's why they were able to win, is because we finally were playing correctly and weren't giving the vampire an extra buff. And at that point, they got their loot. They got the magic items on him. They got the loot in the chest. They raided his bookshelves. So they got his magic items. They got those potions. The ghost, when it died, left behind its lantern. It's basically like an ever-burning torch, but it's a lantern. In the barrels they found, or in the containers over here, let's see, it looks like they found 20 gold pieces, 50 gold pieces of diamond dust, a couple other things, like an alchemist fire. I don't remember what else they got. It's nothing significant. You saw the chart earlier. And I basically had to make up the book prices for what he had on hand, because it's like, well, yeah, he's an alchemist and a sorcerer, so his books are going to be valuable, and books are expensive in this time period anyways, because while they have a printing press, it's not an easy one to use to mass produce a bunch of different books that have like 50, 80, 200 pages each. So I kind of just made it up in the moment. Like, yeah, he's got alchemy books valued at a total of 8,000 gold pieces, ritual books valued at a total of 2,100, history books total of 400, and a fiction collection valued around 200 gold pieces. And then, of course, the killer's journal, which I believe was actually in the chest. They got the 50,000 gold piece bounty on him. They called in the 2 guards they were working with earlier, wherever I put their tokens. Showed him the killer's journal and the pile of ash from the vampire. Thing is, I forgot when I was prepping this that vampires, when they're killed, go into a coffin to reform. And I think I told him that, like, hey guys, I forgot that vampires do this thing. Just pretend that you did find his coffin at some point and stake him afterwards. He's dead. He's not coming back. You don't have to worry about it. And there was also poker chips in the big chest because, of course he keeps some poker chips there. And I talked him into gambling. Finally, one of the players was trying to not let the gambler gamble, and I was like, "Ah, come on, what's the worst that can happen?" And they put it all on red on the roulette table. They won the first round. I think they only put like a few chips on there, and they were like, "Okay, fine, we'll do the full pile of chips." And then they lost. They lost their entire set of chips. Of course, they still had the 50,020 gold pieces that they'd found normally, and the gemstone and all that, and all the books. So they still had quite a bit of money that they got away with. But the transformatives, we can actually scroll up here. It's one of the last things done. So yeah, the Wyverian Victor, who probably will not be making a scene in the coming campaign, he took the Black Dragon transformative. And he got, let's see, so the D1000 in my transformatives, it's I did because so I got the transformers idea from that one guy that I told you about, and his lists are D100s, and there's like a ton of different charts that all have their own, and each result has like subtables in them, and like there are thousands of options. I did not want to make that, so I did it the easy way that only took like 2 days, a few hours each day to actually make, while getting distracted by YouTube every 5 minutes. I'll try to find it here. Subsystem, yeah, here we go. So mine, I kind of want to, I'll probably just do it with editing to block most of this out with just blocks. But basically, the D1000 is up here, and this, and like odd numbers, which are all listed out here. I didn't do this by hand. I got I found a website that could do like list numbers from here to here, but skip this many at a time. List them all out, and then I just had to paste that into Google Doc, do Control F, replace space with comma space, add a comment, and get rid of the enters, all that. And so now when you get someone rolls a number, you can just Control F, bop bop bop, three numbers there, and then put a comma, and it'll show you where there. So it's an even number, so it goes increased amount of ability scores but less rolls on the ability score tables. And it's also in this range of looks like this is just 500, so the upper half of all rolls, 501 and up on the D1000, grants a feat that the monster has. And I just did this with a lot of things, like multiples of 11 are bonuses of saves, multiples of 5 are the skill bonuses, multiples of 89 for some reason are movement speeds, which can grant new ones like flying or tunneling or whatever. And then I've got a ton of charts that range from like D8 to D12 for different creature subtypes. So you roll D1000 and then you also roll on that chart. And then with the higher tier transformatives, you roll multiple times on one chart or another. And then there's of course the dragon chart, which is like a D36 or 38 or something, because dragons have so many things. And then also you have a chance to roll, you can roll D20, which you can see down here. It's the same for each ability score, but I just copy pasted it a ton of times. So you roll D20 at double the tier. So in this case, it's tier 2 transformers, they'll be adding 4. So they roll D20. They need at least a 16 to roll once. If the total is 25 plus, which it won't be without being a tier 3 or higher, You get two things, and if you roll a natural 20, which one of the players did, you get an extra thing, and that determines how many d8s you roll on the strength chart or whatever ability score you got from the thing chart. So you can, yeah, so there's some stuff there. Back on here, they roll a 311 for their D1000, 23 on the D36 for the dragon chart, a nat 20 on the, I believe that would be the strength chart. They rolled 2d8 for that, got 5 and 6. And then D2, which I believe, I don't remember what that was for. Is that a 311 thing? No, it must have been on the dragon chart. Because the 1d2 would have been, was the alignment shifting aspect of what they got. Because black dragons, I believe, are chaotic evil, so one ended up on the chaos law axis. His alignment shifted one step towards chaos. He got +2 strength, +1 con, a breath weapon that's fairly standard 30-foot line. Normal DCs, I think that's a bit low damage there compared to a regular dragon. Of his hit die, and for the strength chart, he got, the first one was increase the strength multiplier on weapon attacks by 0.5. Normally it's, I think it's half for offhand weapons, 1 for main hand weapons, and then 2-hand weapons are 1.5 times strength modifier to damage. So he doesn't use melee weapons, so it doesn't really help him at all. But if he did use a melee weapon and it was a 2-hand weapon, and now do double strength, if it was a main hand weapon, do 1.5 times, you know. It's pretty neat if you are a strength or if you're a melee build at all. And then the second thing he rolled is that he can change the damage type between piercing, slashing, or bludgeoning as swift action with all weapon attacks. And then that was tier 2 mature adult black dragon transformative. The next guy did, I believe, the direwolf transformative, and he did not do very well. He rolled 343 on the D1000, the 2 on the D20. I think he spent a hero point to re-roll it, since he's gonna level up at the end of this, so he's getting a new hero point anyways. He rolled a 10, which totals 14 with the tier 2, so he still didn't get anything on the ability score chart. And then he rolled a D12 on the, I believe that would be an animal creature type direwolves, but he got the same +2 strength, +1 con. He gained scent at a base of 20 feet, which means that if the wind is favorable, it's up to 40 feet. If it's unfavorable, it's 10 feet. And if there's no wind, it's 20. And he got primary slam attack 1d4 at medium size. Primary means it uses his full strength modifier, and there's no penalty to hit. Secondary attacks have like a -5 to hit with. Secondary natural attacks anyways. And then he also took the hulking zombie transformer, so he has an undead transformative, so you can only imagine what that's gonna do. He rolled 834 for his D1000. I don't know why there's a D3 in here, I don't remember, but he rolled a 1. And then 7 on the D12 for the undead chart. So he got +2 strength, +2 dex, +2 natural armor that stacks. He got a feat, which the hulking zombie was unintelligent, so it didn't have feats. So I just defaulted it to weapon focus, slam, which just gives a +1 to attack with slam attacks. Because not only did he just gain a slam attack from Direwolf 1, the hulking zombie had slam as an attack. But on the undead chart, he got something real fun. He now heals from negative energy and harms from positive energy as if he were an undead. And then after that, they got into gambling and roulette. And then the bookshelf rewards, and that was the end of it. Okay, second editor's note. As they were leaving, and they made their way back out to the office, I pointed out something they had forgot when I was running the session, that there was food on his desk, a half-finished dish of haggis. And one of the players, the gambler, he figured out what was going on as soon as I said that Jack the Ripper was turning his victims into haggis to eat. The Victor's player, however, did not quite get that, and was like, oh well, screw him, I'm gonna finish his meal. And Joseph's player was like, no. And as soon as he said that, Victor's player put all the pieces together and it all fell in place, and he's like, oh no, I'm not gonna eat it, never mind, I realize what's going on. And Joseph's character was explaining, like, that's my wife, dude, because his wife was one of the recent deaths, not the one that they went to a crime scene for, but like a week prior at most, maybe 2. End of editor's note. And I'm reusing the same Discord server for the new upcoming campaign, which is called the Growing Tower. It is based off of basically, I was thinking, oh man, what's the overarching plot of this campaign gonna be? I was listening to the Matt Colville things, like running the game playlist, and I was like, well, what if I did Calarol the Vile? He's talked about it a few times, and I kind of went, I knew, just because I had listened to this playlist like dozens of times when I was doing other stuff, and wasn't really listening to the playlists so much as just having it playing. I knew like the 3 or 4 videos they talked about the most, and went to those videos, skipped around a bit. There was surprisingly little detail compared to what I remembered. It was basically, I got the correct spelling of his name. I got that his tower grows on the corpses he's been feeding it. I got the red gold thing, which I believe comes from the Black Company books. I haven't read them, but Matt Colville did, and he put it in there, and I wanted to use the red gold. And I think the bad guy's originally from Keep on the Shadowfell, I want to say. And I have no idea what that is. I haven't played it. I haven't read it. I haven't seen other people play it. So it's not going to be anything like that, even if the players end up recognizing the name because they've played through it. But yeah, and also because I do not have Orcus in my world, because I don't really like the name Orcus, and I didn't really want it to be the same. I ended up changing him to a different demon lord, which was pestilence. So diseases and poisons, and it's also one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And luckily for me, when I went and looked into the horsemen of the apocalypse on Wikipedia, prepping for the upcoming campaign, that's typically considered the first horseman. So the beginning of the apocalypse is what he's aiming for. Now, of course, I'm pretty sure, like with Matt Colville's, that Calarol the Vile is not going to be powerful enough to summon the first horseman. He might be, depending on what level the players are when they go fight him. If he's like a level, if they take so long to get to him that he ends up needing to be like a level 24 cleric to challenge them, then yeah, he might be powerful enough to do it. But likely, he's just going to get some high-end servant of pestilence, and it's going to be a bigger fight. Now, sadly, he is not an undeath related outsider. I'm not going to be able to pull the thing where he comes back as undead for round 2 of the fight after he gets knocked down. But I should be able to figure it out. So yeah. I'm not going to show the work I've done in Foundry for the first session yet, because I know it's a non-zero chance, which basically means it's not going to happen, but it could, that one of the players end up finding me on YouTube, and I don't want to give spoilers, which I guess I already have given spoilers. So I'll just have to hope that they don't show up and they don't find me. But I'm not gonna show it yet. I'll show it once they've played the first session. It should be starting in about a month, maybe less. So we'll see when I get around to making the video. I might do 2 sessions at a time in these videos, actually, because that's the only way that my schedule will that might be the only way my schedule will allow it very easily. But yeah, that's the end of the one shot information and information on the coming campaign. Be on the lookout for more. I might actually end up with a uploading schedule because of this.